First of all, thank you for everybody showing up today, as well as Richard. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Welcome to the Chain Podcast, everyone. This is our second episode, and today Richard Crawford is joining me. He is the host and the executive producer behind the popular TV series Leave No Trace. The series showcases sustainable and opulent travel destinations around the world. Driven by his passion to create these types of experiences, Richard has developed a unique business model, and we're going to dig into that today. Give me a sense, Richard. Sustainable supply chains and tourism in Antarctica. Yep. Not necessarily words that you would find together in a sentence. No. Give me a sense of what that's like.
Well, Antarctica is an incredible place. It's a very unique place. It is the driest, windiest, coldest place in the world. And there's a lot of other fun facts that I'll bring up about Antarctica shortly, but it's a very vulnerable place. And if you can pull off anything in Antarctica, you can pull it off anywhere else in the world, especially when it comes to supply chain logistics.
It's an interesting concept where you pick an extraordinarily difficult destination to get to. Do you look for places that you have different challenges?
Yeah, ultimately we look for places that are maybe not as common as the kinds of place that most people would go to. We did season 2 of Leave No Trace, and we did manage to, not on purpose, it just worked out that way, but we did manage to get to all 7 continents in the world. So we're very, very proud of that. And of course, Antarctica was the 7th continent.
So dig into it a little bit. What does the organization do? Give me a sense of how the process works and how you develop the, sort of the concept and how you pull it all together.
So Leave No Trace, we originally were making a television show called Out of the Ordinary. And we traveled to a few destinations around the world and told their story, very high-end, very aspirational places. And when we were doing it, we realized that when we visited these places, there was a lot of philosophies in place with these places who had really good sustainable practices and eco practices, and let's not forget social responsibility. So after a couple of episodes, we realized that was fine. We were very high net worth, luxurious experiences, but the story about sustainability was much more interesting. And up until that point, a few years ago, if you said sustainable travel or eco travel, people would automatically think, well, I have to be barefoot eating berries in a mud hut, right? But that is not the case. There's a lot of really high-end experiences out there and destinations that do cater to the sustainable traveler. So we knew that story was much more interesting, and it became very relevant in everybody's life. So we went with the Leave No Trace concept.
But Antarctica, was the moon off the charts in terms of your choice? Give me a sense of, you picked one of the most remote places in the world to do this.
Yeah, I think because we had done so many other places around the world, the opportunity to go to Antarctica, well, I believe is probably on 90% of people's bucket list, right? It was certainly on mine. Yeah. And when we first heard about the opportunity, when we were first introduced to Patrick Woodhead, who is a founder of White Desert Organization, we thought we were going to go down there on a cruise ship and cruise around the ice shelf. And as we got into the conversation with him, we realized that no, we were going to be in Antarctica. We were going to go about 300 kilometers in and experience that incredible continent firsthand. So it became a really, really exciting idea for us to go there.
Given the variability, we just talked to Gunter about the variability of his, world rally, where you really don't understand, the weather is going to change. You don't know what the terrain, how that's going to be affected by the, the climate.
Yeah.
I would imagine that your schedule is with minutes in terms of planning.
Yeah, it's a very vulnerable place. Right?
I would imagine.
And the weather changes like that.
Yeah.
So I think the coldest temperature that's ever been recorded in Antarctica is minus 128 degrees Celsius. So obviously when we went down there, we had maybe some concerns about the equipment. I mean, the equipment that we take is pretty high tech and it has tolerances. Yeah. So we're like, well, will it really work if it does get to 128 degrees Celsius? And then of course there's when it gets windy there, it gets windy. I mean, it's gale force winds. Yeah. And it's in essence, a very flat surface in Antarctica because the ice is actually 1.2 meters thick, right? But you're on top of the ice. So Antarctica itself, Antarctica as a landmass,
1.2
is actually
meters
quite
or miles?
undulating. 1.2 miles.
Miles
Yeah,
thick,
you heard that right. 1.2 miles thick, and it's just a sheet of ice. So not only is it very, very windy, but it's very, very slippery.
Oh.
So if you're just a person standing on that ice and there's gale force winds coming in, there's nothing stopping the wind blowing you across the continent. So again, a very, very vulnerable place, but really exciting.
Well, given that most likely you're going to have to do a lot of pre-planning, I'm not sure everybody arrives at the same moment and all of a sudden it's just in time in terms of what you provide. Right. My assumption is that there's a lot of pre-planning on this before the tourists even get there. Give me a sense of what that staging is like and then to the point of them coming.
So to the point, pre-planning to the point that months before you go, you're receiving emails about the kind of equipment that you need. You can't just go willy-nilly down to Antarctica. Oh, you know what, I've got a nice parka, I can put that on, that'll keep me warm. I've got some boots. So they send you emails. There's obviously a lot of insurance forms that are sent out. And then your takeoff point to get to Antarctica with this particular organization is in Cape Town, South Africa. So you go to a safety briefing the day before, where they not only give you all the safety briefing, but they actually look at all your equipment to make sure you have the right equipment. And if you don't, there is a table there that you can buy the equipment. They're not going to let you go without it. They do provide big, heavy down jackets and big moon boots, basically. But they prep you and they weigh everything because from a sustainability point of view, they have to know exactly how much is going down there, passengers and whatever they're taking, and how much comes back. The organization White Desert have the license to operate there based only on the fact that when the season is done, there is no trace of them ever being there. So there's a lot of prep. And a short answer to your question.
I would imagine that afterwards as well. It talks a little bit about the Wolf's Fang to give us the sense of how that's accomplished.
Yeah, so Wolf's Fang is a base, about, as I said, 300 kilometers. And here, the images you're actually seeing on the screen here, this is Wolf Fang airport base. It's a runway, and that's an A330, Airbus A330 coming in and landing on a runway that is about 3,000 meters long, and it's ice. It's an ice runway. It's not asphalt, it's covered in ice. As I mentioned, the ice is 1.2 miles thick. So that runway has to be prepped about 24 hours before any airplane lands. And here you see some equipment dragging this equipment behind them, and what they're ultimately doing is grading the runway. They're actually popping little holes in it, like you're aerating a green if you play golf. And it has to be perfect. It has to have the perfect friction. So they test it. They do a lot of testing. Here's the actual camp from a drone point of view, the central hub, and the 3 units on each side is where you actually live. So within the central hub, you have decontamination, you have decompression chamber, a library, and a place to eat. But the runway itself has to be prepped so that the plane can land. And the way that they measure the friction, the amount of friction that runway has, is they run a vehicle. This is the fun part. They run a truck up and down the runway about 50 times, and then they press the brake really hard, and there's a piece of equipment on front of the truck that measures the friction. And over those 50 times, they get an idea of what that friction is, the average friction, and if it's correct, the plane can come in and land.
You shared a little bit of the structure that are being built, and as you indicated, you leave no trace on the backside of this. Give me a sense of the logistics in terms of getting the supplies down there first. Yeah,
so first of all, the manpower it takes to take people down there. 140 people are at this base.
And how many tourists?
The camp can hold 2 in each pod there, so 12.
Okay.
They do 11 to 12 trips a year, depending on the weather. So the maximum amount at this camp that they can take in is about 120, I would say 140 each season. And the season is very, very short.
Yeah.
In Antarctica, the sun comes above the horizon probably in about October, and it stays above the horizon till probably the end of January. And interestingly enough, something that was really fascinating, we very often film a time lapse of a sunset or a sunrise. As most people know what that looks like, the sun comes down real slow or real fast and it comes up. In Antarctica, when you do a time lapse, the sun moves horizontally across the sky. It's the weirdest thing. It's so weird.
Give me a sense. I mean, you talked a little bit about the preparation for this. How do you ensure that you don't damage the environment as you're doing this?
Yeah, so again, there's a lot of treaties in place and a lot of licenses that are required by the White Desert Organization, and they do an incredible job. Look, Antarctica, human behavior is already affecting Antarctica. It does suffer from climate change, it does suffer from pollution and ozone depletion. And in fact, those 1.2 miles of ice that cover Antarctica make up about 70% of the Earth's freshwater reserves. And if it melted, the global sea level would rise about 200 feet. So it is important that we go in there, it is important that this organization goes in there and leaves it as pristine a condition as they possibly can, and they do everything to do that. They're actually, they've been carbon neutral since 2012.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the tourists themselves, or the individuals themselves, understand that as part of the experience.
Yeah, so several things happen when tourists go down there. Look, I've been questioned about the validity of taking tourists down there. Well, if it's one of the untouched places in the world, why should tourism exist? Let's just leave it alone. As I mentioned, it's a very, very minimal amount of people that actually get to go there in the first place. But it actually helps in a couple of ways. First of all, education and awareness. The people who get to go on these trips really get an education on what Antarctica is like. And it gives them, it actually inspires them to be much more sustainable, because they get a sense of how delicate the environment is, not just in Antarctica, but in the rest of the world. Also, it costs a lot of money to go there. I think on average, to go down there for 5 days, it's $120,000 per person. I can almost hear an audible gasp. $120,000 per person, but it is good to know that some of those dollars go towards research. And again, very, very small percentage of the world goes there for tourism. It's mostly people there for research, and there's dollars that are provided from the tourism industry to help that research, and the data that's collected in Antarctica helps conservation around the planet. And then the other one is advocacy. The people who can afford to go on these trips, right? They're usually very successful people, very high net worth individuals, people who have clout, people who, when they talk, other people will listen to them, and they typically usually come back with a sense of appreciation for conservation. And if you're going to have anyone on the blowhorn about conserving the planet due to these guys having that experience, then it's people with that kind of clout. So I understand the question of let's not make this a big tourist spot, but I don't think cost would ever allow it to be would ever allow us to see over tourism in Antarctica, and there's a lot of positive effects of it. Right.
So dig into that. Has cost increased or decreased since you've started to do this? Obviously, you're always looking for efficiencies. Give us a sense of the cost structure.
For the show itself,
or for the tourism themselves to bring it there. Have you found ways to do it more efficiently?
Yeah, efficiently. And what I really am impressed by with a lot of the organizations that have taken the lead and said we're going to be sustainable, very often it's at a detriment to their bottom line. But they do it anyway because it's really, really important. Now, as sustainable tourism and ecotourism starts to become more and more popular, it's probably going to be a little more expensive. But that's the price we pay as tourists to make sure that we look after the planet. I heard a really good quote this week, and I forget who it was that quoted it, but somebody said, we're living on this planet like we have another one to go to, right? So, and I'm sorry, I don't know who made the quote. I'll get it to you so I can give them credit.
Dig into a little bit on the cost side, because it's one of the areas that has seen a tremendous amount of increase in tourism are these destination spots. Mount Everest is overrun by tourism right now. Give me a sense of how you protect against that.
So over-tourism is a problem, whether it's crowded beaches in the Philippines or it's literally people spilling off the streets in Venice. But I think the example you just gave is the most poignant example. I'm sure many people have seen the image that was going around social media last year of the line of people waiting to summit Mount Everest. In 1979, there were 3,600 people applied for permits and went to Mount Everest to summit.
3,600.
Sorry, 3,600, yes. Did I say that? Yeah, 3,600. In 2019, it was 58,000. Right, so there's definitely over tourism. By the way, Mount Everest, the most expensive, most difficult, most dangerous, and most time-consuming place to get to on the planet, and yet it suffers from over tourism. So yes, it is a problem. But major stakeholders are starting to do things. They're regulating the amount of tourism. They are investing in ways to make it much more beneficial. They're offering other alternatives for people to travel so that they don't always go. So there are things in place. So it's happening. It's not there yet.
Would you describe this as extreme tourism, or how would you describe this?
Our show is not extreme tourism.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things that we've done that have been really extreme, which I tend to enjoy more. But our show is not extreme tourism. It's luxury tourism. We're on the luxury end of the spectrum when it comes to sustainable and ecotourism.
Yeah. So how do you not become Ocean's Gate? How do you not press the envelope a little bit too far in terms of the destinations that we're looking at here?
For me personally, I'm so preoccupied with getting it right in front of camera. I think I'm probably in a lot of dangerous situations and I don't even realize it. The real unsung hero was the guy holding the camera, right? So if I'm hanging off the side of a mountain, I'm doing it with all limbs, My cameraman is hanging there next to me, maybe with one arm, and trying to film it. So I guess there are some really dangerous things that we do, but it's maybe I'm a little bit of adrenaline junkie. Maybe I'm just so preoccupied in telling the story so that our audience can see what I'm experiencing.
Is it at the end of the day, are you promoting more sustainability, or is it more the access to these remote destinations for individuals? Because we're talking less than probably 1% of the population that can afford these types of...
To go to Antarctica in particular. The show is about sustainability. It's definitely about sustainability because it's actually the luxury part is relevant, right? For example, in Antarctica, we're in these pods. These pods don't actually have a very complicated human waste management system. We can talk about it because it's really interesting. Not the best subject, but it's interesting. So from a luxury point of view, if you told somebody, you're going to Antarctica, and by the way, there's no shower in your cabin, you have to walk to a central location to have a shower, they would say, well, that's not luxurious. Well, it is in Antarctica, especially when the option is a little tent in the middle of the ice. So it's quite relative.
Is it generational that you're seeing sort of the interest in this?
Yes, I would say so. I would say that the younger generation appreciate the fact that it's important to save the planet. I think they're willing to go into the pocketbook a little bit more, and I don't just mean from going to very expensive locations, just spending more for it to be a sustainable experience. So I think they're more willing to spend the money on that than perhaps the older generation. It might be that the older generation say, hey, we're not going to be around much longer, so maybe we don't need to spend as much money, but it is, I see a little bit of a generational gap when it comes to people who are willing to spend a little more money.
It's interesting because one of the things that we focus on is, that commitment to individuals paying with their pocketbook consistent with their values and consistent with their expectations. And as a number of studies indicate, the 35 and above, we have a say-do gap. We say we're interested in environmentalism and climate change and a lot of the ethical, issues, but we don't spend consistent with it. The younger generation does, under 35, but they don't have the pocketbook today.
I guess that's the dichotomy of it.
So give me a sense, who's your target market?
Our target market is everybody. It is everybody. We want everybody through the show. The show did really well. We filmed the whole first episode before COVID hit. So COVID was obviously a terrible thing for the world, but it was actually a good thing for our TV show because people became armchair tourists, right? They couldn't travel, so our show became very interesting to them. But it's very aspirational, our show. So people watch it and say, you know what? One day I want to go there. And we get a lot of emails from people who've watched the show and gone to somewhere that we've already gone to, and have praised the show for highlighting the fact that they could go there and do that.
What role did the consumers play in just shaping this? Was there a demand for this, or did you identify that there was some white space there, that there was a business here?
Yeah, I identified that there started to become a demand for sustainable tourism in general. And sustainable tourism actually goes back a lot further than you think. I think the first record of sustainable tourism was in Switzerland in 1886. The Swiss Alpine Club was formed. And they were promoting mountaineering and alpine exploration, but they were also big advocates for the protection of the wonderful Swiss environment. So it goes back pretty far, but the real rise of ecotourism came in the 60s and 70s when the growth of environmental awareness really hit everyone. And then kind of became mainstream late 20th century, where travelers started to seek out sustainable, eco and socially responsible destinations so they could have a much more immersive experience. And what that did was make the major stakeholders realize that if we do this, we can actually make money now, right? Whereas before, I think not too long before that, it was, again, as I mentioned before, it was kind of a negative concept. Hey, I'm going to be a sustainable tourist and we'll have an eco experience. And people are like, oh, a little bit of a tree hugger, right? So, but that has completely flipped around. So the demand is definitely there. In fact, I believe in a recent survey, when asked, about 76% of people said that their next trip, they would strive to make it a sustainable trip, whether it was the transportation or the destination or the activity.
Yeah. And I think the demonstration is really critical here. One of the vignettes that we shared today with Gunter, as well as yesterday in our transport episode, was the concept of race without a trace. And a couple of weeks before they set up the entire camp, and then they break it down, and they have nothing to show in terms of the impact. Very similar to what you're describing, here today. The takeaway for me is that if we can do it in the driest and coldest place in the world, why can't we apply it in other areas? Give me a sense of how you take it the next step, that we don't just leave it at the show.
Yeah, in Antarctica in particular, they really do, similar to the race that you saw with Gunter, is they have an agreement with the part of Antarctica that, let me step back a little bit. Antarctica is made up of 30 countries, really. It's the Antarctic Agreement of 1959. And those 30 countries decided that there could be no military, no nuclear explosions, no nuclear waste dump, and no mining. And the organization White Desert have an agreement with the British Foreign Ministry that when they leave there, when they leave the spot that they're in for that season, there is nothing left behind. In fact, the pods, you couldn't tell from the aerial view, but the pods are on big skis. So at the end of the season, they're attached to a piece of equipment and they're taken away from the area that they were in. And over the course of the winter, the storms come in, the snow blows over where they were, and there was never any trace of anything being there. Obviously, not everybody can do that. There are destinations in the world, and by the way, there are tens of thousands of eco destinations around the world now, so it is growing. There are destinations around the world. Obviously, you can't just pick up and take an eco lodge away that has just been built and costs lots of money to build. So that doesn't apply to them, but it is important that the people who visit there behave responsibly, that the organization educate them on how to behave responsibly so that they don't mess up the place that they went to see in the first place, right? And then leave it for the next generation to come and see it. So.
And let's get into that in the population in terms of the message that's coming out there. What's the feedback that you're getting right now from the general public as well as very interested individuals in sustainability? What are you hearing?
The general feedback is that people are willing to do it. People again are willing to spend a little bit of extra money. They want the education. They want to be responsible tourists. There's lots of technology to help them be responsible tourists. The booking platforms, the apps, even blockchain technology. A lot of destination managers are using that to authenticate the sourcing of materials or the sourcing of even services. So I think it's been well received. I think people want to travel more sustainably now.
Is there a next step? You guys have taken it pretty much to the edge right now. Is there something that you're looking at and you're saying, you know what, this would be really cool if we could do this?
For the show personally?
Yeah, for you personally.
You know, man, I've ticked a lot of boxes. To be honest, the next one, probably the next thing that we could do is go on one of the SpaceX flights, or you know, or Virgin Galaxy, or whatever. And we did meet a gentleman in Antarctica who is one of the CEOs for the Virgin experience. Yeah. And he promised us that one day we would get up there and do that. But we'd only do it if we could tell the story of it being pretty sustainable.
Yeah. So as you're developing the series, are you getting more demands from the tourists, or are you getting more demands from the producers of the show? Where's the demand coming from for this kind of experience?
For people to watch the show?
Yeah.
The audience. Like people look, your documentary, right? The 6 episodes that you have touches quite heavily on sustainability. Yeah. You couldn't tell those stories. I mean, I know it's about supply chain logistics, but you couldn't tell those stories and not mention anything about sustainability. Yeah. People would watch it and say, wow, they just showed us how the world, you know, is making all this stuff, but didn't even talk about the sustainability. So there's a demand for it, for sure.
Because more often than not, our focus is on developing the product and getting it to the customer. We tend not to think about afterlife. We tend not to think about reuse, repurpose, and the waste impact.
Yeah, but I don't think that's happening anymore. I think before you even build a product now, an innovation in some kind of product, the first questions that are asked is, how can we do it sustainably? Yeah. Because if we don't, the consumers are not going to buy it. Because if they can buy the same product somewhere else that was made sustainably, that's the decision they're going to make.
And that is one of the challenges that we have, is that we vote with our pocketbooks.
Yeah.
And as long as we continue to vote for cheap, inexpensive products, we'll continue to make cheap, inexpensive products. And we're going to do it efficiently. Right. We're going to make a lot of money at it. Yeah, yeah. And as soon as the consumer stops buying that inexpensive, cheap product, then we'll stop making it. Right. So your target audience, do you see an impact in terms of what the message that you're getting out there in terms of your target audience?
Yeah, I see an impact. We get emails and we get texts from people saying, I really enjoyed the show and it taught me something, and I've made this little change in my life to make things better. Another quote, again, I wish I had the source, but I don't, was someone said, we don't want some people doing everything when it comes to sustainability. Mm-hmm. We want everybody to do just a little bit, and that's where we make a difference. Mm-hmm.
Give me a sense of the stakeholders. Who's the investors in this, and what are they getting out of this?
Everybody's an investor, from countries to governments to businesses to local communities, and then to the traveler themselves. So everybody has to invest in this sustainability idea. Yeah.
Is it the conversation about sustainability sometimes has taken a little bit of a backseat today in a lot of organizations. We tend to see some greenwashing, we tend to see some hush-washing. Yep. How do you not get painted by that same brush?
As an organization, Leave No Trace as a program. So interestingly, it's a good question, because not a day goes by where I don't get an email saying, how can you possibly do a show about sustainability and eco-travel when all the destinations you go to, you jump on a commercial aircraft and there's a carbon footprint to that? And it's a genuine question, I get it. Now, that was a very censored version of the emails I get, because I get some really bad ones. But the first thing we do is we always, as a crew and as a company, offset our carbon footprint when we fly. And by the way, that's very, very easy to do. You tick the box on the website when you buy your ticket that says, would you like to reduce your carbon footprint? And you pay the extra money. It is not a lot. It's a few bucks, right? Considering the amount of money you pay for the flight. So there are many, many ways to offset it. So,
if we can do it in Antarctica, can we do it anywhere in terms of sustainability, or is that a bridge too far?
No, doing it in Antarctica, the logistics it takes to make that work. We could talk 3 hours about the logistics. Actually, we could talk for 3 days about the logistics it takes to make Antarctica work. But genuinely, you're right. If they can do it there, there's no excuse for anybody not to be able to do it.
Yeah, it really is a demonstration project in some respects, that you're picking up the harshest, driest, coldest place on the earth, and you're demonstrating that it can be done there, so that is not a bridge too far for us to embrace. That a focus on sustainability, as well as the experience that you're providing for the individuals.
Yeah.
I think that's critical for us. Give me a sense of the business longevity. Do you run out of?
Like I said 5 minutes ago, there are tens of thousands, eco-lodges, eco-resorts, eco-activities around the world. The fun part for me in making this show is we're about to go into season 3.
Yeah.
On season 1, which has been released. Season 2 should be released by the end of this year.
Yeah.
And that's where you'll see the Antarctica episode and some other incredible destinations around the world. But the good thing is there's a lot more things to see. So from the research department, where I go out there and look at the globe and say, where do I want to go next? There is so much opportunity. So I would like to think I can just take a dart and throw it at a map on the wall, and wherever it lands, that's where we go next. But there's so much opportunity. I don't think we'll ever run out of places to go and places to highlight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself as a supply chain guy?
I guess in the sense that as a crew, when we're moving country to country, we have to make decisions about the equipment we take, about the time that it takes to get there. I didn't see myself as a supply chain guy, but I think if you peeled back the onion and looked at it, you'd probably say, you know what, I am.
That's exactly what you
And my producer and my director who makes all those decisions is probably like, yeah, I'm a supply chain guy.
So give me a sense. This is obviously a passion of yours.
Yeah.
Give me a sense of the genesis of this. Why use ecotourism as a key delivery? There's a lot of ways for us to communicate about the impact of sustainability. Why ecotourism?
Because if I asked everybody to put their hand up in here who likes to go on vacation, everybody in here would put their hand up and say, I like to go on vacation. That's why it's sustainable. Yeah. Everybody, we're just like supply chain logistics, it's a global thing. Oh. We travel around the world more now than we ever did. We have the opportunity to do that. It doesn't take us 3 years to get on an old beat-up ship with sails and travel across the world. We're there in the same day, at the other side of the world. So the longevity is just based on the fact that everybody wants to travel.
It's an interesting business proposition, given the demonstration of how you can do it and how you can be successful at it. And I think that's part of the challenge that you have, is that this isn't just done for publicity's sake in terms of developing a show. Yeah. There's actually a financial incentive here to do this.
Financial incentive in the sense that we make money making the show.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, I'd do it for free. I would do it if it were just breaking even, because the experiences that I've had doing it, I feel very, very fortunate. I'm very, very fortunate and very lucky that I've been given this opportunity in life to see the world for work. We're in a business that is very rapidly changing, and it's becoming much more difficult for producers and production companies to make money now. Streaming and all of that stuff, that's another conversation. We obviously want to make a profit. We're a business for making profit, but I would do it to break even. Just for the life experience.
Your passion comes through, Richard. I want to thank you for sharing your insights for us. How can they find out more about the show?
You can actually watch Leave No Trace Season 1 on Amazon Prime here in the United States. And leave a nice message. Some people left bad messages, and they're like, and it brought our rating down. So if you do watch it, please leave a good rating, just to bring it up. Even if you don't like it.
Thank you very much, Richard. Right. This is an extraordinary opportunity for us to demonstrate that if we can focus on the key aspects of delivery on sustainability, that there really isn't anything that we can't engage on a focus on ensuring that we have a long runway here and that there's a story to be told for years to come. And I think you've shown that there are ways to do this. Yep. Thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.